Omnibus is a production of iHeartRadio.
This is Jim, and
receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 382.AC0212, certificate number 48261. Droodles.
This might be titled An Elephant Giving an Ant a Friendly Pat on the Back. But the real official title of this is A Raisin Making an Acceptance Speech at a Raisin Convention.
You and I have wanted to put Droodles in the Omnibus for a long time.
Yes.
In fact, I think it was your show topic, and I just snagged it.
You loved it so much that you were like, Droodles. Give me Droodles. I'll trade you anything.
It was after you stole Plymouth Rock and something else from my list. I was like, I'm taking John's Droodles.
You have never even seen Plymouth Rock. I lived Plymouth Rock.
Well, that's what happened here. Like, I realized I had a deep personal connection to Droodles that I did not know. Because you and I were like, we didn't even say Droodles. We said, what were the names of those weird 50s drawings that Frank Zappa liked? And we were like, yeah, those, whatever they're called.
Yeah, how Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch.
That should be a thing. Because the show is pretty much us forgetting the names of things. No, we just look it up on Wikipedia and then edit out the part where we looked stuff
We're
up.
like, what was the thing? Yeah.
I found out that my friend Fritz has just edited in our time, the early 21st century, has just edited a definitive compendium of these 1950s Droodles.
Which were all created by a different person.
Yes. He is, so that's what surprised me. Like, so I know Fritz from Jeopardy. He's a Jeopardy Tournament of Champions winner, like all my friends.
Could we do an entire year of Omnibus where we just picked topics that were the strange picadillos of like people
of Jeopardy
that
winners?
Won Jeopardy a couple of times?
Like weird sex things? Like we'll go down the list by name.
I didn't realize that any of you had weird sex things.
No, they probably
like
don't.
Largely the sexlessest group of people.
Did you say sexlessest? I hate how every news story about Jeopardy has sexlessest in the lead. Come on.
Come up with a new word.
It's the eunuch quiz show. He's a guy I knew, like, I spoke at Google once and he interviewed me because he was a Jeopardy MVP type, but he was also a
Google MVP.
A writer at Google, a content strategist, which is what I guess they call writers at Google.
I had a friend that did that at Microsoft. He was a content strategist.
Love to strategize content. Like sometimes when the muse strikes, you just got to sit down and strategize some content. Do you ever just pick up your guitar and strategize some chords?
That's all I do now. It's not how I used to write songs. So Fritz Holznagel,
who, I had no idea would be coming out with a book about this 1950s fad I kind of love. He, the last thing I talked to him about was he was becoming a guru of the Jeopardy signaling device.
Is this like one of those Cold War signal stations?
Yeah, he's like a number station. If you turn your radio to Google, he's like 79. No, it's the buzzer. Everybody calls it the buzzer.
Oh.
But you've never seen the show, apparently. Trebek will always say, put down your signaling devices.
Is that really what he says?
Yeah,
that sounds like a content strategist. What a weird
He's from a simpler time. In the past, they do things differently. And Trebek will always say, on last night's program. Like, no one has said program on American television since Walter Cronkite retired.
Why is Alex Trebek referring to last night's program? Oh, because if somebody won and then they came on again.
And of course it's all a fraud. Like after, the show ends, in 5 minutes, the winner puts on a new blouse and Alex puts on a new suit, and then boom, you're right back out there, and Alex lies to everyone and says, on last night's program, on yesterday's program. Maybe he has to say it yesterday because some markets Jeopardy airs during the day.
I bet that's true. Well, it's on Armed Forces Radio at like 10 in the morning, right?
I was looking at this online because there's in our current time, there was a lot of talk recently about this new champion that was making a run at the record.
Right.
And everybody was very interested in, I think, Mobile, Alabama, which airs Jeopardy at 10 a.m. Eastern. Because at that point,
right before dinner.
Yeah, the cat's out of the bag now. Obviously, how many people in Alabama are watching Jeopardy at,
a lot,
at 10 a.m.?
I imagine.
Really? Jeopardy?
Yeah.
No, they're all watching Price is Right. Alabama?
Sure. Are you kidding me? I mean, Alabama is one of the, I would say, maybe the most erudite of the southern states.
You got in trouble with Southerners before, and now you're not messing around. Yeah, Atticus Finch types, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They're sauntering into work late because they watch Jeopardy.
They're fanning themselves with their large white hats.
Scout, come away from the window. It's time for Jeopardy. Why were we talking about this? Oh, but somewhere in Okinawa actually airs Jeopardy, like for this Navy guys.
Oh, that's on the
and
they're on the other side of the timeline.
Right, so it's already tomorrow. Like Okinawa has already seen tomorrow's Jeopardy, so they are our quiz show time travelers.
Twitter screws all of this up, doesn't it?
It does. Jeopardy never had to worry before, and now like I'm going to join the Navy just so I can see Jeopardy 18 hours early. Anyway, Fritz Holznagel wrote a monograph on the Jeopardy buzzer. He spent all this time researching it. He built his own replica buzzer that can plug into a USB port on your computer. And he built a website so that he could try different strategies for buzzing speed.
Is there some kind of proprietary signaling interior to those things that they're not just a regular button?
Yeah, Jeopardy doesn't buy them on eBay from a high school quiz bowl tournament.
They're made by a guy with a big furry mustache.
There's an old guy with a soldering iron and a green acetate visor thing.
I do it one way. I'm the only man that can.
I assume it's proprietary, but he's kind of just duplicating to the best of his ability what he's held in his hand and seen on TV.
I see.
And he was just trying to get faster and share strategies. And he sent me a replica. I have a replica Jeopardy buzzer in my desk drawer.
Are you still the fastest gun in the West?
Well, you can't go online and play against people.
Really? That should be a thing.
I'm almost certainly not the fastest gun in the West because I'm 45. But he, that's his idea. He was like, I'm going back on Jeopardy for a term. I'm now in my 50s. How am I going to keep up with all these young Red Bull swinging a-holes?
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that Jeopardy buzzer keying is a thing like Major League Baseball where you would get old and your reaction times would be slow and that it would be noticeable enough that it would affect the game?
Yeah, because it's fractions of a second. Wow. Like on Jeopardy, you can buzz when... This has nothing to do with Droodles. Let me reassure the future.
Let me be the judge of that.
The people who like the long entries are loving this right now. You can't buzz in when you know it. You have to buzz in when Alex finishes reading the question and some mysterious guy somewhere activates your device.
Oh.
And so if you buzz in early, you actually lock yourself out for, I don't know what it is, a quarter of a second or something.
So it's not even the buzzer that you're trying to anticipate. It's some guy.
Yes, it's Trebek's voice. And this guy's been doing this for years. So it's really you just being in Alex's head and his head. You're having this big communal LSD. Sexlessist? You're all like kind of keying on Alex and you're like, this guy's probably going to press the button. Pause now. And, some days you can do it and some days you can't. And you don't know if you were early or late unless they come up and say, Ken, you're early every time. You need to take a breath.
And do they?
They'll coach people at the commercial if people are struggling because they don't like people to just be wailing away on that button. And
Right.
Because you'll see it on TV sometimes. People get frustrated and they're holding their buzzer in the air like, Alex, it's not working.
Yeah.
It is working. They're just probably too early. You get keyed up. You get adrenalized. And there are a set of lights you can see. So there's when the buzzer becomes live. So either you're reacting to the lights or you're trying to anticipate the lights, depending on what school of thought you're in.
I get it.
And my friend Fritz wrote a monograph for people. Here's what you should do. Here's what I did. I took my reaction time from 0.28 seconds to 0.16. Here's what you do. Hold very steady. It's almost like teaching somebody to fire a gun.
Did he publish this on Medium, or is this a thing that...
It's an 806-page hardcover book, leather bound. He's handwriting them like a monk. He's illuminating with a big capital J on Jeopardy.
Does he have little dirty pictures in the margins?
Oh yeah,
spy versus spy.
I told you all these guys have weird fetishes. No, I think it was an e-publication. But people were downloading this book, and the new guy who was on Jeopardy earlier this year, he was a student of Fritz Holznagel, and that's where a lot of his buzzer mojo comes from.
Interesting.
I think. So that was my last talking to Fritz. But when he sent me this book, when I told him, hey, you just did a book on Droodles. I love Droodles. He sent me a copy of the book. And he's a fan of Omnibus, by the way. He said he liked the Hotel Detectives.
Hi, Fritz.
Hi, Fritz. I looked him up, and I did not know any of this about him. He has like the weirdest career. In addition to being a writer of books about 50s fads, apparently, and the world's living monographist on is that right? Monographer?
That's what I would say.
Monographer?
Monographist.
Monographer sounds too much like pornographer.
He's the new monographer.
The new
Porographer.
That's right. He's a buzzerographer. He has an Emmy he won in the 1990s.
Whoa.
For, this is going to be so great, a claymation Easter special by Omnibus perennial Will Vinton, the California Raisins guy.
I'm so impressed. He won the Emmy for doing what job?
I think he was a writer on this thing.
A content strategist on it.
Yeah, he strategized some singing. I don't know what an Easter claymation special looks like.
Wow.
I assume very little claymation Jesus, plenty of claymation rabbits and ducks.
What would be the least amount of contribution to a production that won an Emmy that would make you proud rather than embarrassed? Right? I feel like I wouldn't care. Like if I have the statuette, that is the only bar. I have a couple of different friends that have won Grammy Awards for best packaging. I know two people personally that have that. That's their Grammy. I'm guessing that one's not on the telecast, right? It's not on the telecast. At an earlier banquet, and that banquet is emceed by like Art Garfunkel or something. But like having the Grammy on the wall or up on the mantle is pretty great. But it leads to questions, I guess. And then you have to say, it's for. I guess what you say is, packaging. There's a funny story. Yeah, that's right. That's what I would do. But like, have you done the local television program? You probably wouldn't have, because it's kind of rock and rolly. But there's a public access station here run by the city that has like a cool rock program. And I have not done the cool rock program. Whenever I go down to the studio, because I've done it a few times, they have a wall of daytime Emmy awards. Just a wall of them. And I was admiring them one day, and somebody there, the host of the show, said, "Would you like one? Like, we got so many of them here. We'll happily give you one." And I was like, I think I'd be embarrassed to just get like one of your... Because then what is the story? Some guy gave it to me. Like, "Hey, John, you got a Emmy on your mantelpiece." Yeah. The guy gave it to me. Down at the thing. When my wife and I lived in Salt Lake City, we used to go down to there's a Shakespeare festival at Southern Utah University where they've got a replica Globe Theater. And it's not bad. It's not as good as... In Salt Lake? Ashland, Oregon. No, it's like Southern Utah, like Cedar City, Utah. Oh. Like almost all the way to Vegas. The London of Utah. That's right. Where would you expect there to be a Globe Theater replica? Cedar City, Utah, of course. It's just been there forever. And, if you go early in the day, there will be people, jesters saying huzzah on the green. Oh, yeah. And people playing the lute while they slice your prime rib and stuff. There are a lot of futurelings listening right now who are like, yes. We need to start this. Because it's for all, the retirees. I almost said retirees in a very weird way, by the way. I almost said retiree, which I don't like. This show is melting both of our brains. It's the old folks who would love to, they're doing As You Like It, honey. Sure. That kind of crowd. And in the lobby, they had like a regional Tony. But they were, and that's, in Southern Utah, to have a regional Tony is big news. Yes. But it's a regional Tony. I didn't know there were regional Tonys. Exactly. I don't think anyone knows. When you win one, that's when you find out. From the Four Corners area. But it's, exactly. This is actually in Southwest Utah, so it's a different corner. Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Is there a name for the Southwest corner of Utah? Southwest corner? Three corners. It's called Area 51. It's California, Arizona, and Nevada, so it kind of is the three corners. You're pretty close to California. Oh, no. Wait. Utah, Arizona. Yeah, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. There we go.
It would have to be Utah.
There's no California there.
There was a huge display, like the place where the armed guards surrounding this Mylar, this big bulletproof thing containing their regional Tony.
Was Catherine Zeta-Jones trying to steal it in the middle of the night?
She was slinking through lasers. I've always wanted a regional Tony. Anyway, so Fritz's TV career evidently included the children's TV program, which he did not win an Emmy for. He was an Emmy for. He was an assistant director on We Sing, with 2 E's. Are you familiar with this children's music program?
Vaguely. It predated the appearance of my own child, so.
Yeah, it postdated my childhood and predated my children.
Yeah.
So for me also, it's in that gap. But I think it's some kind of just kids singing Farmer and the Doll together show.
Right.
And it was a book property. So the publisher's daughter, he said, was there, Claudia Sloan. And he quickly realized Claudia Sloan was the daughter of Larry Sloan of Price Stern Sloan, the longtime publishers of kind of odd book-like things.
Oh.
Most famously, Mad Libs.
Oh, Mad Libs. And Sniglets, probably.
Did they do Sniglets? There are a ton of comedy fad books that were not Price Stern Sloan. Like they did the ones that where you weren't quite sure were books.
Yeah, they're always on newsprint.
So they sold 150 million copies of Mad Libs, which
Wow.
which should probably be its own omnibus at some point.
150 million? That puts it in the rank of one of the top-selling books of all time.
It's straight up J.K. Rowling, Agatha Christie, the Bible territory.
Incredible.
Right?
Although, how many copies of Mad Libs have I had over the years?
Right.
More than a few.
And always the first 2 or 3 are filled in pencil from the car trip, and then the rest of the book is empty. Nobody actually wanted to do 30 Incredible Hulk themed Mad Libs or Knight Rider themed Mad Libs. It's a funny story. These 2 guys, Roger Price and Leonard Stern, were writing partners, and one of them was trying to knock out a script for The Honeymooners.
Uh-huh.
And I guess Roger Price walks in and Leonard says, "Hey, I need an adjective," because he's trying to figure out how to describe something. And his quick-thinking comedian friend Roger Price says, "Clumsy and naked." And he just starts laughing. "Why are you laughing?" "I'm trying to describe Ralph Cramden's boss's nose is now Ralph Cramden's boss's clumsy and naked nose." And so they immediately are like, "Whoa,
Light bulb.
this is a party game." So they did it with their friends. And now I looked at Mad Libs in Wikipedia just to get the sales number. They call it a phrasal template game.
Phrasal template.
Isn't that awesome? Don't you love getting with your friends and playing some phrasal template games?
What's crazy is I've been playing Mad Libs with my 8-year-old, and 8-year-olds are pretty literal. And so you say, you give them this, like, give me an adjective, give me a noun, give me a verb. And they give you really, really straight versions of adjectives, nouns, and verbs. And
Sad.
Then you put them into
Red.
Yeah, you put them into the Mad Lib, and it just reads like kind of a boring paragraph. It's like, oh yeah, the sad dog went to the store.
Give me a preposition. Hereupon. A lesson I learned as a kid was you very quickly just start saying toilets,
Exactly.
stinky,
Boner.
boobs. And then the Mad Lib comes alive. Then it's all about Knight Rider's boobs. But the success of Mad Libs led these 2 friends, Price and Stern, with their friend Sloan, to found a publishing house in LA where nobody ever founds a publishing house.
Oh, right. That's not a big publishing town.
No, it was a weird thing. But they were incredibly successful, not just with Mad Libs, but with a bunch of these other book-adjacent properties like the We Sing, songbooks for kids. But also, do you remember Serendipity?
Of course.
These maybe this should be an entry. Brightly watercolored 18-page children's stories about a little animal learning a lesson or something.
Yeah.
With text on one page and a picture on the other. And of course, there's a Seattle connection. Do you know the Seattle connection?
No.
The Wheedle on the Needle.
Oh, I know Wheedle on the Needle.
There was a Serendipity book about
There was.
A little Sasquatch that he's got a red nose.
He's an orange sort of Sasquatch with a red nose.
And is he kicked out because of his red nose? Is there a Rudolph vibe?
There is some kind of vibe like that.
He ends up on top of the Space Needle.
And that's the little...
That's why there's a light.
Yeah, there's a little red blinking light on top of the Space Needle.
So the local lore, you'd always tell your kids... I don't know, did you hear this as a kid? My parents were always like, look, you could see the Wheedle when we were on the freeway.
Not only did I hear it as a kid, but there was one Christmas at Frederick and Nelson when you would go sit on Santa's lap. This is in 70, I don't know, 5 maybe. And there was a Wheedle
like a big mascot Weedle?
Like a person inside a big Weedle suit who was there with Santa.
It may have been because I think the Weedle at that time was the mascot for the Sonics.
Whoa.
Like you'd go to a Sonics game and it would be the Weedle. Like this must have kept, I mean, maybe Serendipity was selling Mad Libs numbers, but like in the Northwest, those books were huge.
I think it also, Seattle was a foggier town then.
So
before climate change turned the entire world into a hot desert.
So there was kind of a mystery to what the blinking light was.
You'd drive around and you'd look up and you'd see part of the Space Needle, and then up in the clouds there would be this red flashing light. So because now if you looked up there as a kid, you'd be like, no, it's a radio tower.
Right.
But back then it seemed to me that the Space Needle was always kind of shrouded in mist.
Well, maybe it was just shrouded in the mystery of the effects of this book. You know, it's like in the Edward Scissorhands town where when it snows, the kids say that it's Edward Scissorhands sawing up ice sculptures, you know, like the kids in Seattle were always like, maybe that's the Weedle up there. It's a weird story. Why is he on top of the Space Needle? He never gets to go inside. You never see him move. Who feeds him?
I mean, you know, the Space Needle was pretty interesting here. Well, I'm thinking 1975. What am I thinking? The Space Needle was like just a little over 10 years old. It was still like a crazy thing. And
maybe there was a Sasquatch up there.
There used to be, I think, a noticeable uptick in UFO sightings when it was foggy and people were coming over the Aurora Bridge, and you could just see the Space Needle
floating above the Queen Anne.
Sticking up over Queen Anne. And so on foggy days, they would get a ton of UFO sightings from people that saw it every day.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I drove across Aurora Bridge to get here today.
Yeah.
It's a cloudy day. I saw the Space Needle. Do you know what I did not do? I did not call the Air Force. I was like, hey, that's where that always is. I think Price Stern Sloan also published those Mr. Men books while we're doing 70s and 80s mini publishing fads. Do you remember those? These little cartoon, it was a British series, these little cartoon guys, Mr. Tickle, Mr. Handsome.
Oh, of course. We have those here.
Little Miss Chatterbox. Yeah, don't kids still have these?
Yeah, and when we have a Weedle on the Needle, it's probably on one of these shelves right here.
So these guys I guess they do very well selling their little pamphlet-like things. When I was a kid, I had a Price Stern Sloan book called Typewriter Art by a guy named Dan Karlinski, who did like everything from very simple kind of hieroglyphics to very like complicated shadings, all done on a typewriter. And, you know, sometimes he would manually use the ribbon for highlights or washes
But he would type and then he would sort of backspace and type
back
over
then
again.
You could move it and over and type on it. It wasn't an IBM Selectric, you know, he could turn it to wherever he wanted and put the character. So, you know,
I have 4 typewriters like that within 100 feet of where we're sitting.
Should we get one out? And it's the ASCII art discovery that you can get light shading by using a field of periods, but dark shading by using a field of what's dark, a percent sign or capital K or exactly. And this book was actually by Dan Karlinski, who I later interviewed because he invented trivia in the 60s as a Columbia or 50s as a Columbia University kid.
Invented it. Like, here's a thing.
He invented it as a publishing phenomenon. Like, there had already been radio quiz shows, but he was like, what if this was all about boomer crap? What if this was like, do you remember the name of Tonto's horse?
Right.
And Howdy Doody's penis?
Right.
Or whatever.
Wait a minute. I don't think that was one.
That was probably not one of them. But these guys would all do this at Columbia, remembering their 50s childhoods, and it turned into, he got a book deal, and then it, became a board game in the 80s. And
I wonder if, because one of the most popular games in my rock friend group here in Seattle is, what was the band where the guy from the other band was now the bass, and then somebody will be like, oh, that was Pleasure Elite. And you go, oh, that's right.
Are these kind of like unsigned local bands? It was like, remember our friend's third band or whatever.
Tons and tons of local bands that only we would remember, but that played like significant roles in the music scene at the time. So there's a group of about 5 or 6 friends I have that are all roughly my age that remember the late 80s, early 90s rock bands. And it's I swear to you, a number one fun game for us.
How ungoogleable are these answers? Like
pretty ungoogleable.
That's awesome.
Because none of these bands ever rose above the Merc, but we all played shows with them or went to shows where we saw them. And we can generally come up with the name. Like, and we're not talking about bands like Flop that everybody knows. It's bands like Helltrout or...
I feel like most listeners for them, Flop and Helltrout are interchangeable at this
Right. Sure. I'm not, futurelings are not like, oh, Flop, although they may be.
Maybe. That was exactly the appeal of trivia as a 60s fad. It was all these kids sitting together in the common room at their dorms being like, oh yeah, what was the name? Because it was the first time that a cohort of American youth had a shared childhood culture.
Right, of course.
Because, radio and TV had kind of created that. There was no national culture before that. I guess you could talk about Tom Swift books they were all reading or something.
Or The Shadow.
Yeah, but before radio, there wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
I guess, pulp magazines, I guess. But
sheet music.
Yeah, everybody was, what was the name of that song about Panama hats? This is when you do your automobile thing.
Automobile.
So anyway, Price Stern Sloan becomes a going concern on series like this. But Roger Price, the co-creator of Mad Libs, his first publishing phenomenon was Droodles. We finally got there.
Which was a term he coined?
Yes, and here's the thing. It was a portmanteau, get this, for drawn doodle.
Seems like it's a little bit of a recursion.
Yeah, I have an issue with that. Aren't all doodles drawn? Now, you've seen doodles before, but here's one that's drawn. Now, how much would you pay?
Drawn Droodles. It's very satisfying to say Droodles if you really put the accent on the L. If you say Droodles, D-R-O-O-D.
Like, are you saying it has to be a clear L? Like you're a
Droodles. Droodles.
Like you're saying dreidel?
Like dreidel.
I have a little droodle. I made it out of clay.
And I don't know what that is. That there's surely like a term for the little glottal at the end of droodle. Droodle.
I mean,
opposed to droodles.
Well, it's a dark L in that you say it with the tip of your tongue. If the tip of your tongue touches your mouth, like you're a Spaniard or an Italian, la leche. La leche. That's a clear L. Is kind of more back in your throat.
I see. Thank you. I should say to futurelings that whenever I don't know the pronunciation of something and I open a dictionary and point to the strange glyphs,
the upside down letters
in the pronunciations, I can always turn the book to Ken and he can read those things in real time. He doesn't have to sound them out.
You have math anxiety, but for IPA symbols.
I can't. I look at them and I'm just like, it just looks like one of those fake alien languages.
There's dots over letters that shouldn't have dots.
And Ken just reads it. It's really a cool skill.
Just imagine it's a heavy metal band,
Yeah.
Roger Price was an interesting guy. He's, as you can tell from the list of things these people published, and it's kind of like looking at Fritz Holznagel's resume.
Yeah.
Maybe looking at his recipes too. Like these Jeopardy people are all these kind of multi-talented Renaissance women and men who, in Fritz's case, can hold down a good paying job at Google.
But they often
not true in all cases.
They're astrophysicists as well as being trivia nerds.
Right. But some of them really do just have a lot of projects going on, and their Mensa meeting to go to. And, it's not clear how they're paying the rent.
So I have a book here, The Ultimate Droodles Compendium, annotated by Fritz Holznagel. Mm-hmm. And are you saying that these drawings are the original drawings of Roger Price?
Some were reader submissions. Here's what happened. So he has this weird background where he goes to an art academy. He likes art from a very young age. He can draw. But then somehow he gets into radio and, starts writing. And he gets a big break writing gags for Bob Hope, this guy who never wrote his own jokes.
That is a big break.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody really, I guess it's not clear how he gets this job, but suddenly he's one of Bob Hope's dozen writers, and Bob Hope just wants 20 gags a day.
Well, that's how you get the job, right? You make a list of 100 gags, you send them in. And then if Bob Hope likes him, he says, write me 50 more gags.
People will do this today. People will send 20 jokes to Jimmy Fallon or something.
Yeah.
And I think you and I know people who write on these staffs. And
we do.
There's somebody on the staff who will send them a list of setup lines, which is just weird stuff in the news yesterday. Hey, Paul, did you hear about this? Did you hear that they've approved a new drug for, or something that happened in the news?
Yeah.
Did you hear what the president did yesterday, Paul? And then these people have to write the end of the joke. It's Mad Libs, basically, except they get to see the setup.
It's great. I'm always so impressed by comedy writers because, like telling jokes, being funny is pretty easy.
In a conversation, sure. Yeah. But sitting at a computer?
And just here comes the joke.
Got to have 20 jokes by noon. That's when the staff meeting is. Can you imagine?
Astonishing.
Yeah. But Bob Hope must have liked this guy's, jokes. He's the only, Roger Price is the only writer that Bob takes with him to his like post VE Day tour of Europe.
Oh, wow.
All these USO stops in the UK and France and wherever. Hey, this is Bob. Roger Price wrote my jokes, Hope, and
he's coming out with topical jokes for every place the plane lands.
Yeah, Fritz includes a joke that he had to write the day FDR died. Here, write some jokes about FDR's death. And the war's still going on, of course. Yeah, in the middle of World War II. And so it's the example he gives, which I guess Bob Hope liked, is kind of a non-joke, where he's like, suddenly President Truman's in here, and he's suddenly takes over FDR's hand at the poker table, and he looks at his cards, and he's got Admiral Nimitz, and he's got Dwight D. General Eisenhower, and he names off all these military bigwigs. Look at that hand. He can't lose. He's all in. So the joke is, our military is so good, we will beat Japan. It's not
great joke.
Not a super subversive joke.
But it's a big applause.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Everybody goes like, yay!
You get clapter.
Eisenhower.
Do more Nimitz jokes. After the war, Roger Price comes home and he has a nightclub act where he's a comedian, but he's such a smart guy. He's doing kind of this faux academic lecturer gag that a lot of these guys would do in the 50s, sometimes with a fake German accent.
Yeah, right.
They'd cut a record and it would be Professor von Schmickenlooper or something.
In a weird way, this was a kind of heyday for smart comedy.
Yes.
Nichols and May and, comedy records were coming out. It was a little bit highbrow.
It was. And it was definitely like aimed at a youth audience who, had college degrees or were in college and liked to hear kind of smart references and smart jokes.
Yeah, it wasn't bawdy. It was erudite.
Like, yeah, Red Fox invented the comedy record, and so there was kind of a separate tier of more earthy humor.
Yeah.
But really, then it was just like rock and roll. Bob Newhart discovered that and was like, what if this had no sex jokes in it?
What if I sit and pretend to talk on the phone to someone else? I mean, people would sit and listen to a half hour of that. What's that, Mabel?
Right.
You say what now?
And then they would flip the record and it would be like, oh, he's doing it again. But this time he's talking to a window washer who's late or whatever. In Roger Price's nightclub act, he would often have a chalkboard because this was a common kind of entertainment before TV. You would go to see a guy do a chalk talk. And he would impress you with his funny or clever drawings on an easel or a chalkboard.
This is between strippers.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a burlesque kind of thing where a cartoonist would come out and do some kind of naughty chalk talk.
Right.
I don't know what kind of jokes he's doing, but it's definitely the groundwork for Droodles because he's doing these funny, simple drawings that get a quick laugh. He gets cast in a Broadway review, so maybe he can sing. He knows Gary Moore, so suddenly he's hosting panel shows on radio and TV. And when he gets a book deal to write one of these kind of quickie comedy books that is everywhere in the 50s, it's called In One Head and Out the Other. And there are two things to know about this book. One is that it spawned one of the most famous comic catchphrases of the 50s. I had one grunch, but the eggplant over there. See, you're laughing already. I guess this became like nonsense sentence became a hit in nerd circles. So, sci-fi and pulp fans would always be saying to each other, I had one grunch, but the eggplant over there.
Sure.
And then the Mad Magazine guys got a hold of it and just put it everywhere.
Right.
So like a Harvey Kurtzman era Mad Magazine would be full of, I had one grunch, but the eggplant over there jokes.
People rolling in the aisles.
Well, I think originally it was like, oh, I remember that reference to that thing people were saying. But, kids would get it and be like,
it's just some hip doodad language.
Yeah, they think it's a Mad Magazine creation. And if you tell a kid something is funny, they will just... Do you remember The Simpsons where Bart is reading an old Mad Magazine and he's like, he loves that they're making jokes at Spiro Agnew's expense? He's like, Spiro Agnew. Like they're roasting that Spiro Agnew guy again. He must work there.
It's one of my favorite jokes that drives my daughter crazy and all of her friends as well is, what's the difference between a chicken?
What is the answer?
One leg, both the same. And whenever my daughter would ask, tell me a joke, I'd always say, what's the difference between a chicken? And apparently the original joke was, what's the difference between a duck?
My dad used to say bear.
He said, what's the difference between a bear?
And I think the answer would be because ice cream has no bones.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a thing, or did he just make that up?
Well, I've never seen that. But one leg, both the same was always... And, and people would little kids will argue with you that that's not a sentence. Grown-ups just roll their eyes. It's like a Grunch does a thing with the eggplant.
Grunch. That's dirty. Like there's two kinds of nonsense jokes. One, it kind of like you see that there's something to it and you make the connection and you laugh.
Right.
And then there's the one where you're waiting for that and then you see there's nothing to it and then you laugh. Like there's a Lewis Carroll equivalent of this joke that kind of has a twisted logic to it. And that's pleasing in a way. Like, why is a raven like a writing desk joke from Alice in Wonderland?
Why?
It's never answered in the book,
Oh.
but I think a response that maybe Carroll suggested, or I don't know, maybe one of his successors suggested was because there's a B in both. And the joke is there's a B in both.
That's a great joke.
You're laughing. But there's a kind of a logic to it.
Yeah.
But then there's the nonsense answer that really is, I had one Grunch, but the eggplant over there.
Right.
And you're like, that doesn't mean anything. But there was another chapter in this groundbreaking book about modern art. And I'm sure it's him just taking the piss out of, my kid could draw that kind of stuff,
Although this is truly like a sort of Cream and Bastard's Rise situation where he's just so clever at so many things that it's impossible that he wouldn't get. I mean, only in today's culture would a guy like this not get recognized because his stuff is so mixed media and it's unclear.
Yeah, on the internet, could this guy become a YouTube star doing his chalk talks, his Freudian chalk talks?
Probably not. I mean, there are so many great animators and comic strips and weird little things out there now. But the thing about these Droodles is they're really pretty good. They're extremely clean humor. Like you could get most of these if you were 7 years old.
Right, or in 1700, really. Like,
but they're also pretty great and funny to be 40 and
the very first Droodle was the cleanest one probably of them all. It was just every Droodle is a square panel. This appeared in this modern art chapter of this book. It was just a square panel with a horizontal line running through it. So you're looking at a bisected square,
right?
Basically. And the caption was a scene in Texas.
Right.
So the joke is, it's flat. There's no scenery.
So looking at them, well, first of all, the square looks hand drawn in every Droodle.
Yeah, the aesthetic of these comes from his nightclub chalk talks, I think. Like you're supposed to imagine a guy drawing it on a napkin or something.
But also the joke, it's a visual joke, but the joke is always in the caption. It's
yes.
You never look at a Droodle. The whole point is you look at it and don't know what it is.
You look at it and it's so simple that it could almost be it's so general that it could be many things at once.
It's like a drawn doodle.
Yeah, and in a way, if you think about it.
Yeah, sure.
But it doesn't immediately look like, you can't immediately look at it and be like, okay, this is going to have a picket fence, or this is something about a football helmet. Like you can't pick anything out of it.
Right.
It's very abstract. It's shapes. He says it was based on a game that he and his friends in Little Wyden, West Virginia used to play as kids called What Is It?
Mm-hmm.
Where they would draw a simple thing and then everybody would guess and be like, it's a bear from above. No, it's a jar of mayonnaise that broke, or, and people would yell out answers.
And his friend, I mean, it's more evidence that places like West Virginia is full of genius savants.
Well,
but none of his friends shared in his publishing success, it sounds like.
No. Well, I don't think they came up with it either. Like I was looking up the historical precedents for Droodles, and it turns out you can go back to the Italian Renaissance.
Oh.
There's an artist named Agostino Carracci. He and his brother Amabile and their cousins started one of the first art academies of Renaissance Italy in their hometown of Bologna. And there's a 16th century biography of them, maybe 17th century, by a guy named Malvasia that still survives today, where it notes down what these guys were like and what their academy was like. And I guess one of their favorite pastimes was what Malvasia calls line puzzles or pictorial guessing games that they gave to ladies and to friends.
Uh-huh.
So they're flirting with Droodles.
Right.
By means of just a few lines or marks, they would capture and evoke something complex. And Malvasia actually draws a few of these. So we have some Renaissance era Droodles.
Do they play?
They're pretty. There's one they're pretty good. They're clearly Droodles. There's one that's a horizontal line, so it's just like a map of Texas, with a half circle sticking above it, and then a little triangle next to it sticking above it.
And it was called Medici's bed.
Yeah. Oh, it's a very naughty Catherine de Medici thing. No, it's a bricklayer finishing a wall. You're seeing,
sure.
It's the top of his head and his trowel as he finishes the wall. But that's a straight up, that could be a 50s Droodle.
Sure.
The others are a little more maybe era specific. There's one that's like it looks like what's a table? It's a square with the bottom missing. So a 3-sided square with a little. Podcast is not the right format for this.
Well, you're doing a good job.
Roger Price could never have had a podcast.
It's a square with a.
So imagine there's these 6 lines. Now wait for it. It's elephants in your fridge. There's a table. It's like a table. It's a square missing the bottom. There's a little kind of crooked shark's fin coming up from it at an angle from the top of it, and that is a monk falling asleep in the middle of his own sermon.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the pulpit and then the monk's hood,
Right.
yeah, like leaning back behind it.
As you described it, my first guess was a monk doing something.
Is that true?
Yeah, so they got me. I mean,
you and Agostino Carracci just have a thing. You're going to go out and buy his comedy records. So, after he put one of these doodles in a book, he pitched it as a newspaper column in 1953. That every day he would.
It's like a Far Side.
It's exactly the Far Side. I mean, it's probably the predecessor of Far Side, a simple drawing with a quirky caption that makes you rethink it. And so he had to come up with one of these a day. And it's exactly what you say. The picture is very simple. And because it's got little text beneath it, your eye sees the picture first. It matches exactly the way of the brain process. The joke works exactly the way the brain processes the visual. Because then you read the thing at the same time as the picture is sinking in a different part of your brain. And you've got 2 scripts. You've got like what my brain assumes these boxes are. And then you look and you're like, oh, hey. There's a few different kinds of jokes. Should we walk through a few typical Droodles so the future can recreate these as they scrape them into their
I think futurelings are getting this, but they may, it may be that the square is novel to them because they live in a 4-dimensional universe.
I'm sure they have a stick and dirt.
Interesting.
Is that presumptuous of me?
Yeah, you don't think it's possible that all of the world's forests and bushes all burned in the Great Cataclysm and they live just in a stickless world?
If they're non-corporeal beings, they can beam Droodles into one another's auras.
Okay, I get it.
But I just assume, like, we keep describing these things to the future that they could not reproduce,
Yeah, right.
Like, think of the hundreds of things you need to invent to get to Milli Vanilli.
It's going to be very hard to build a turbo encabulator based on our descriptions.
But here's a case where if you have a stick and dirt, you're good to go, guys. And some kind of pseudopod that you can hold the stick with.
So describe some Droodles.
So often they will be a easy to understand thing from a novel or unusual angle. Like there will be 2 vertical lines, like a path going up and down, and then 2 little circles on each side of the line across from each other. And that will be...
Howdy Doody's penis.
What are those 4 things growing? Oh, knotholes, I guess.
Yeah.
No, it's a bear climbing a tree, but from the back.
Oh.
You're seeing his 4 little paws.
Good one.
There, another time, it's a line bisecting the square up and down, and then 4 little bumps coming out of the side of it, all next to each other. This is the inside view of Napoleon's coat.
Yes, his hand.
Because normally you see the fingers disappearing. Now you're seeing the opposite of that, which is a typical comedic technique, a reversal. Sometimes it's an unusual cropping. The most famous Droodle of all time shows a kind of a weird parallelogram wedge coming in from the side, like you're seeing the side of a cliff, coming in from the left side with a much smaller triangle rising up from the bottom of the square. And it's a ship arriving too late to save a drowning witch.
That's right.
Which was immortalized for a new generation when Frank Zappa named a album after it in 1982.
Right.
And made that the cover.
And I think a lot of people that were fans of that album and fans of Frank Zappa didn't really get that it was a Droodle. It just seems like a modern art.
You immediately can see what a Droodle would be,
right?
But you would not understand. You could not extrapolate a daily newspaper feature from it. Yeah. That one was famous even in its time. I guess apparently Price's penthouse apartment in New York had a giant version of Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch in black and white tile in the entryway.
A long time before the Zappa album.
I think predating Zappa, yeah.
It's amazing to imagine a time in American history when a Droodle could sweep the nation.
It was 50s were a time of fads.
Right.
And
this is something you could show a grandmother, you could show a little kid, you could take to the office. It feels a little subversive.
Yeah, so it was a youth culture thing. Here's Newsday. Teens have gone hog wild for Droodles. The Parka and Dungarees set.
considers it
I'm
more,
with it.
considers it more important for a cool cat to have a bunch of the spring 1954 version of Droodles in his pocket than folding money. You'd rather have the latest Droodles, the spring collection, than folding money.
Wow.
And
Think about that. You know, a couple of quarters in your pocket for an egg cream.
Jingle.
And some Droodles.
imagine that they want to have the new Droodles too. You know, that it's the kind of thing where, hey, have you seen the new one?
What's the latest Droodle?
Another unusual cropping Droodle, just to go back to the witch. There's 4 narrow rectangles coming in from all 4 sides of the square, north, south, east, and west, and they all meet in the center at a tiny circle. Have you seen this one? You want to guess?
Describe it again.
4 very skinny rectangles coming in from the north, south, east, and west of the panel, meeting in the middle at a tiny circle. It kind of looks like a crosshairs or something.
The flag of New Mexico.
It does look like the flag of New Mexico. Or 4 elephants inspecting a grapefruit. A lot of it is this 50s elephant joke thing where the punchline is kind of an anti-joke.
Yeah.
You think it's going to be something that exists, like there's a puzzle to solve, and the joke is you could never say that a ship would be arriving to save a drowning witch.
Well, and
or that elephants would be inspecting a grapefruit.
This is one of the things that's confusing about this book, because there are a lot of reader submissions here, and there are a lot of the great Droodles are ones where the captions are super simple. Like there's what looks like within the Droodle a V-neck sweater with a button, right? Is what it looks like. There's a big V coming down from the top, and then a single dot, and it looks like a V-neck sweater with a button. And it's called Rocket Ship Landing on a Dime. Now that is something that is simple, but you would never guess it. But then here's one which looks like it's a big rectangle, sort of cattywampus in the middle, a line across the bottom that looks like a horizon, and a little black dot at the bottom of the rectangle, kind of connecting it to the horizon.
Between the horizon and the parallelogram thing?
Yeah, and the caption is, "Rich termite who has purchased his own cross tie," which is like a railroad cross tie, "and is taking it home to make sure it is never treated with inland creosote." Well, that is not funny, and also not. I mean, and I feel like this might be.
Do you think it's a topical gag, or we just know that termites will not eat creosote wood?
Well, it's under the heading Madison Avenue Droodles.
Oh, this is an ad for inland creosote.
Yeah, it's an ad.
This is something that happened. They were so big that multiple companies would license Droodles. Like Lucky Strike did a whole ad campaign.
With Droodles.
Yeah, I think there'd be like 3 kind of vertical rectangles standing straight up, but the one on a horizon and the one on the right, the 2 are hollow and the one on the right is filled in black. And I think it's like 2 cigarettes meet a nudist friend.
Oh,
see, he's not
hilarious.
He's not wearing his outer.
He doesn't have his paper.
Yeah.
Well, that maybe the Zappa fans of the late 60s, early 70s would have gotten the reference because they were all parka and dungarees.
The parka and dungarees set. Maybe that's true. And it was kind of a nostalgia thing. Like Zappa kind of played with that, right? Like old culture stuff and, mixing in bubblegum pop and pop culture and comic books. A lot of them did have the long captions because, I mean, this one was an ad, but a thing people don't remember about Droodles is that in the newspaper, you would see the thing and you'd see the Droodle and you'd see the caption, but then there would be 100 words of funny text below the caption.
Doing what?
More for your money's worth. Nothing really, just kind of a weird kind of 50s nonsense humor.
One leg both the same?
One leg both the same, basically, kind of proto Monty Python stuff that would be like, now this termite's got a long road to hoe ahead of him, blah, blah, blah. And it would be a little story with kind of odd non-jokes about, and then a duck comes out. And today when we think of Droodles, we do not remember the text, the block of text. That turned out to be not necessary for the joke.
Was this a thing where it was just like a reverberation of Dada, maybe? That nonsense itself was kind of a nonconformist or anti-authoritarian element?
I mean, Dada really is kind of the confluence of art and comedy anyway.
Yeah.
Like think about Duchamp being like, I'm going to turn this urinal upside down and call it fountain and shock the blue hairs.
I'm still shocked.
So a lot of the subsequent kind of nonsense brain-breaking comedy that came after that. I have a thin comedy book from the 30s I bought called I Will Not Imitate 4 Hawaiians. And it's based on this guy's popular radio act that he would do where he would explain in great detail
in kind of chalk talk comic lecturer fashion how he would imitate 1, 2, or 3 Hawaiians. But he'll be damned if he's going to imitate 4 Hawaiians.
This was the whole bit?
Yeah.
It lasted 30 minutes?
I guess. The book has other stuff in it. But yeah, and you really can see Dada in that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like, I do not know what this is, but I'm laughing. And there's like, that's kind of the dominant mode of comedy still, honestly, right? I don't know why I'm laughing at this thing. Here are some other classes of Droodle. 2 simultaneous jokes. Sometimes it would tell you what the punchline was, and then it would give you a little bonus joke. It would be like, but what if it was also... Like there's a giant circle with 2 little kind of curly feet things coming out the bottom, like little socks coming out the bottom. And the thing says bubblegum champ. Like the kid's blown a bubble so big you can just see his you can just see his shoes
feet.
out the bottom.
What's the second joke?
Small boy throwing a baseball at you. So suddenly there's the switch in scale gets you, and the picture changes without changing.
Right. Why waste the second opportunity for a Droodle? Just draw the shoes slightly differently, and it's a different one.
Spread that out over 2 days, Roger.
So my question for you is, these all seem fun and easily doable. Do you think if we drew some squares here that we could draw 10 Droodles in a half an hour?
I think that's the appeal of it.
Yeah, I feel like we could.
That you're all, you and your friends have seen this and you can make up your own, like anytime there's a joke fad, knock jokes, elephant jokes, there's a lot of these forgotten ones.
Horse walks into a barn.
Yeah, what to do with a dead cat. Anytime there's like these templated jokes, it just makes humor approachable for kids, for young people, for newcomers, for unfunny people.
A priest, a rabbi, and an imam.
Right. Like for that, you'd have to invent a story.
Yeah.
But really for a knock joke, if you can think of 2 words that kind of sound the same. I think in the 60s, there was a popular set of jokes about a wind-up doll. Have you heard about the Fidel Castro wind-up doll? You wind him up and he insults America.
It's a great joke.
So there's no joke, but once you've got the format, you can bug your buddies at work just kind of on your own. Like just think of a public figure and you've got a joke.
It's the format more than the joke that's the joke.
Exactly.
I mean, you could do...
It just makes it easier to understand. It's like a set of IKEA instructions for making a joke, really, because you've seen 8 examples and you're like, oh, I see what these all have in common.
Right.
Here's number 9.
So the difference between a great Droodle and a bad Droodle is really evident looking through this book.
Yes, you can see there's classics and then there's...
Just like, it's 4 guys sitting around 4 anoraks sitting around coming up with Droodles.
Well, the way in which it coalesces is important, I think. Sometimes a Droodle can be in 4 dimensions. Like you'll immediately see that something happened just before or just after. Like the boy throwing a baseball at you.
There are kinetic Droodles.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like they won't move, but suddenly when you get the punchline, a story will appear. And that's very pleasing. Like, there's one that's a horizontal line and then a little black triangle coming out each side of the line with its point at the line. And it's a man in a tuxedo who stood too close to the front of an elevator. So suddenly the whole story appears in your mind and you can see the doors close. You can see
his ties.
The 2 to 3 seconds before this guy's poor bow tie
really great.
But then there are these off-model ones. There are ones that are kind of like... trying something different. Like there are ones that are logic puzzles. Like there'll just be an empty circle and it will say Lincoln penny before 1809.
There were no Lincoln pennies before 1809.
I assume that's the year of Abraham Lincoln's birth.
Right.
Right.
Well, of course there weren't any Lincoln
So
pennies.
before he was born, it would have just been an empty circle,
Lol.
A lot of them are puns. Like you pointed out, didn't you read one that was kind of a pun? No, I don't remember. But these are very easy to see. Like there will be like a twisted kind of spaghetti going through the frame, like a path with 2 circles inside it, and it will say, 2 blood corpuscles who loved in vain. But vain will be spelled with an E.
My brain doesn't register puns, even when they're explained.
When I started talking, did it just turn into Charlie Brown Teacher? And then 2 corpuscles, or there will be like a club, like a suit from a deck of cards club, with it's black on one side and white on the other, and it will say integrated club.
Yeah.
At least that's
good stuff.
Pop culture reference.
No, that's and at the time especially, 1954, that would have been like
that's very cutting. That's a little edgy, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that was banned in a lot of Southern papers. But you can see the mechanism that makes a lot of these, and that's why they become homemade. Like there will be a reversal. Like you'll see water droplets upside down going into a square, and it'll say a water faucet inhaling. Or just a long rectangle, and it will say an accordion that's been cleaned and pressed. Like the wrinkles are out of it.
I like that one.
Yeah, see, they're whims. The best ones are whimsical.
So now, how did Droodles go from being this thing that like the cool kids on Vespas were carrying in their back pockets to a thing that needs to be explained for a half an hour on a podcast?
Half an hour is very optimistic at this point, I think. They did what a lot of popular newspaper features did back then. They started to become little paperbacks. You know,
Right.
Pogo and Peanuts and all these newspaper features, you know, those Mad Magazine paperbacks. It was a way to repurpose already published material for a new audience. And they sold like crazy. And to this day, you go into any used bookstore and there'll be a full shelf of Mad paperbacks, a full shelf of Pogo, Peanuts. And this was true of Droodles. They were recollected into books that sold a combined 1.5 million copies
Wow.
for a few years in the 50s. They were in all these ads. They were, they were licensed to cocktail napkins.
Sure.
So at your party, the drink would be set on a cute little Droodle and all your guests would ooh or ah. There was even a 13-week Droodles panel show on NBC where a bunch of funny, Carl Reiner and a handful of other funny comedians would try to guess the Droodle. And Don Pardo was the announcer. Saturday Night Live, Don Pardo.
So yeah, that would be hilarious. A bunch of comedians looking at it and coming up with funny answers.
And it was...
But it didn't go to multiple seasons.
After the 13 weeks when it was a summer fill-in for something, it did not go. But it was a pretty big hit and apparently a good show. People would send in their Droodles so they had audience submissions. And this is...
Groucho Marx, I bet, appeared. That seems right out of his wheelhouse.
That seems very... that would be a very good get for them. That seems a little ambitious. Like, right. if Carl Reiner is your dream guest.
But I mean, Groucho Marx when he was 79, right?
And honestly, that's one of the legacies of Droodles. That kind of funny audience participation panel show. Roger Price died of lung cancer in 1990 at the age of 72.
In 1990, okay.
A while ago. He died pretty young. He never had another big book after 1970. He had a couple big best-selling comedy books about his philosophy of voidism, or about how all Americans were turning into rubes with a double O. He was one of these guys who missed the smart Adlai Stevenson 50s, I think, and did not like hee-haw. But he had so many...
Just like me.
Yes, except how are you in the hee-haw generation and thinking this?
I love that Camelot humor.
Bob Newhart, baby. But, he did, for the last, the post-Droodle 20 years of his life, he did corporate entertainment, showed up in front of a bunch of...
He did his blackboard thing.
He did his blackboard thing in front of a corporate
Except
crowd.
He was doing a whiteboard now.
Wrote for the National Lampoon. He became a pretty successful movie character actor. In the movie of Mame with Lucille Ball, he has a very funny bit as a nudist. If you watch the movie, that's Roger Price. He's in one of the Billy. This is right up your alley, the 70s culture. He was in one of the Billy Jack movies.
Really?
Yeah. And I think he's one of the government scientists in the forgettable 1970s Disney movie, The Cat from Outer Space.
How would you describe that as a forgettable movie?
I know you love 1970s Disney. This is the one where they couldn't even get Dean Jones, so it's Ken Berry from Mayberry RFD. He had been married 4 times, all unsuccessfully.
Yeah. Decided
in his 70s he wanted a 5th wife. So he decided he would go to his ancestral home of Wales and put ads in all the papers.
He's Welsh. Of course he's Welsh.
He's got that. So yeah, it all goes back to Catherine Zeta-Jones, I guess. Wait, that wasn't even about Roger Price. He's put ads in all the papers saying he wanted a genuine, all caps, Welsh wife. He is tall, spare, age 56. He was actually 66 at the time. And just barely a millionaire. Humor, warmth, resilience required. So he goes to Wales, interviews these women, no dice.
No dice.
Goes to France, puts the same ad in, interviews women at his hotel, no dice.
No dice.
Sadly. But PSS continues to sell Mad Libs books like crazy and is finally bought by Penguin and continues as a Penguin imprint for many years. Today, Penguin still publishes Mad Libs, except now they are about Infinity Stones and YouTube stars. They're all, I assume. I don't know. Are there Logan Paul Mad Libs? Probably. And of course, he had to deal with, the last 20 years of his life were putting down Droodles knockoffs.
Oh, he just got into the lawsuit game.
Yes, sending angry letters to the people who were printing Mugsies and Dribbles. And you might remember this, Zoom Doodles. Do you remember that the TV show Zoom did Droodles?
I didn't.
I
remember Zoom quite well, but I don't remember Zoom Doodles.
I did not either, but he hated Zoom for their Zoom Doodles and sent them, angry cease and desist.
There are a lot of reasons for adults to have hated Zoom, but Zoom Doodles.
He has an unusual one. But I think the main legacy of Droodles is that they're still widely used today in, this is a little niche. They're still used in academia. Like scientists studying humor or cognition or both will almost always show people a series of Droodles and say which of these makes sense, devise 10 captions for this.
Sure. And the guy that's always like, it's two people having sex in the dirt.
Yeah, it's like a Rorschach test, but for humor and cognitive testing instead of emotional issues. Exactly. And then, of course, Gary Larson and all those Far Side imitators doing a very simple pen and ink style, where the caption is sometimes a non-joke. If you remember the famous Far Side that says, it's a series of squiggles, and then at the bottom it just says cow tools.
Right.
And it's an infamous Far Side because he just got thousands of letters by people who did not get the joke. And he just thought if cows had tools, they would kind of suck, right?
Yeah, what would they look like and what would they do?
They would be poorly made. So really, it's a Droodle. The whole joke is that there's no joke. But, in the 80s at least, that got hundreds of angry letters to the Sacramento Bee and the Kansas City Star.
Well, that's the problem. In the 50s, you would never even think to write a letter to the guy that does Droodles. But by the 80s, it was, all those people were tweeting at him. And that concludes Droodles. Entry.
Droodles.
Droodles.
We should have been saying that all along.
Entry 382.AC0212. Certificate number 48261 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event social media still exists in your era, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project. Our handles were at Ken Jennings, which was a square with a long bisecting line that looks like a horizon with a tousle of
Opie hair,
sort of blonde Opie hair, like rough sort of Constitution blonde hair, and a winning smile. And mine at John Roderick, which was just a horizon.
What is your
just
doodle?
just a flat horizon?
Really? Yeah. It's not like a close-up of a herringbone jacket or something?
I also maintained an Instagram account under the same name, which is 100% full of Droodles. And you can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com.
Read our social media. You will laugh so hard you'll do a little Droodle in your pants.
Oh, boo. Go to the Futurelings Facebook page, the Omnibus Futurelings, where they will be bisecting and dissecting this episode as they do all episodes.
They're going to be angrily trying to recreate all the Droodles we mentioned on the show, and trying to figure them out.
Now that you have suggested it, they certainly will.
Can you reverse engineer a Droodle? Can you, given the caption, can you draw the thing?
And make it funny.
Yeah, that would be like an Eldward.
I like it.
That should be the game.
Yeah, right. Just now for social media, just have a YouTube star describe Droodles, and then the best one gets posted.
Don't forget to like and share. Woo!
You can send us things. Now, someone on our site said that you and I already have all the things in the world and that people should start sending him things.
Here's what you should do. Send us the things, and we'll decide if he should get them.
There you go.
We will redistribute the things.
Send us whatever things you want to send us. Ken has brought a big pile of things here to the table.
I got the mail yesterday.
And what are those? There are a couple of maroon T-shirts.
Arizona State Sun Devils T-shirts. Did we accidentally say University of Arizona Sun Devils at some point or something? Why are we getting Sun Devils T-shirts?
I'm not sure. Are you gonna rock your Sun Devil T-shirt?
Well, they come in extra large and triple extra large.
So they
think one of us is a huge man in a rascal scooter.
What you should know about us is I am an extra large and Ken is a medium.
So John's going to get the extra large, which will fit him.
Yeah.
And I will get the triple extra large, which I will use as a fort.
Yeah.
And have adventures in.
Anyway, send us delightful things like this to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
John, look how big the shirt is.
That is
look at the big shirt.
So big. I was going to suggest you use it to like cover a chair, but it may be too big for that.
It's for a divan. It's for a love seat.
Yeah.
I feel like the Subway guy holding up the giant jeans. Like, look how much weight I lost, John. Look at this.
Yeah.
You're
not that guy. Don't be Jared.
No, I don't share all of his interests. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the eventual catastrophe may never come, may be averted for some time at the very least. But if the worst comes soon, if I am found in the wreckage holding a gigantic Arizona State Sun Devils t-shirt, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back at you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.
For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.